everybody, it's Paige Evans and I'm so excited to share this tutorial with you today. I am going to show you how to create a chipboard covered mini album with a hidden accordion paper hinge binding. So first I have this piece of 12 by 12 chipboard and it's nice and thick. You can find it on scrapbook.com and I will leave a link. And I am trimming it into 3 pieces. 2 of them are going to be sized to 4 1/4 by 3 1/4, and then one piece will be 4 1/4 by 1 1/2. And how I got these measurements is I want my photos and pocket pages to be 3 by 4, and so I added a 1/4 inch to 3 by 4. And then for the spine, it's just an arbitrary size. It needs to be the same height, which is 4 1/4, and then the width I just chose 1 1/2 because that was easy. But you can make it bigger or smaller. It's up to you, however big you want your book to be. Now, as you can see, my paper cutter didn't go all the way through this thick chipboard, and so I used an X-Acto knife and a cutting mat to finish cutting through this thick chipboard. Once you have the 3 pieces of chipboard cut for your album, you need to pick a pattern paper to wrap them with. I'm using paper number 19 from my Truly Grateful collection with Pink Paislee, which is this small florals, and since that's the side I want showing, I flipped it to that side down. I'm using liquid glue. It's PVA glue, specifically for bookbinding, and a paintbrush to apply it to the center piece and carefully placing it on the pattern paper. Now, I learned in my bookbinding class at BYU that I took 13 years ago that the space in between the pieces should be 2 pieces of that material wide between. So I'm going to grab 2 pieces of scrap chipboard and use it as a spacer between the chipboard pieces. And I'm also putting a ruler across the top, which I nudge the chipboard pieces up against to make sure that everything is aligned. So again, adding liquid PVA glue to the back. It's a little bit messy. Just try and be careful so the glue doesn't get everywhere. Putting the ruler at the top and my 2 chipboard spacers between, as that's just the spacing that I learned how to do in my official bookbinding class. All right, so then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to use this Teflon bone folder, which I also have a link for, to rub the paper down, really make sure it gets stuck on there and to smooth out any creases. Now I'm going to use a tool that I created in this same bookbinding class, so it's over 13 years old. I really should make a new one. It's a 3/4 inch tool, so it's 3/4 inches wide by, I don't know how long it is, probably 12 or 15 inches. And I'm using it as a template to trim off the paper all around it, and it leaves a 3/4 inch border all around, so the spacing is even all around because I just want to try and be as perfect as possible, even though it's not going to be perfect, and I'm a-okay with that. So now I'm folding the paper edges over. I'm creasing them right up against those chipboard edges to create a nice clean edge. And to miter the corners, I'm folding up each corner into a triangle shape, so angle it right to the corner at all 4 corners. And then take a pair of scissors, have it parallel with the table, and just snip those corner triangles right off. So you can see the scissors are on the table basically, and I'm just cutting off those 4 corners, and that creates a nice miter. And so I'm folding it over. It doesn't really need to be folded yet. And then I'm going to use the same liquid PVA glue and a paintbrush, and I'm going to fold the top over. You have to hold it in place for a few seconds so that it sticks and stays in place. Then the bottom edge, same thing, adding liquid glue and folding it up. And since I already did that pre-crease, it folds up really nice. And again, press it down as hard as you can to get it to stick. And then I'm creasing in those little corners so that it folds over and makes a nice crisp and clean edge. And then I'll go ahead and do the right edge just like I did the top and bottom edges, adding more glue, folding it over. And if your fingers aren't strong enough, you can use the Teflon bone folder to smooth it down. But I will do that at the end to make sure everything stays in place, especially over those creases. You really want to press as hard as you can with the Teflon folder. smoothing everything down, making sure it's creased along those edges to make it nice and crisp. And then I'm using the pointy side to score into the creases. So it's looking good. Now I'm going to trim a piece of that same paper. I like the B side with these diagonal lines, and I'm going to add a pencil mark where that crease is, where the papers overlap, and trimming it to 7 5/8 by 3 7/8, or 7.625 by 3.875 inches. And I will have all of these measurements on my blog post, which I will link to as well. So you can have easy access to the measurements and also a template, which will be essential for scoring. So I'm adding more of the liquid glue, the liquid PVA glue, to the back, so the floral side, flipping it over, and as carefully as I can, placing it in the middle to cover up the rest of the chipboard, using the Teflon bone folder to smooth any creases and also score in the fold lines. Ta-da! So it's looking great. To add more interest and texture, I'm going to machine stitch around the cover. So with the floral side up, and I'm using a Brothers sewing machine. I will link to my favorite from Amazon. And I'm using white thread by Coats & Clark and the longest running stitch that my machine offers. So when I get to the corner, I rotate it and then keep doing a straight stitch. I've had this machine for a dozen years and it goes through paper and chipboard flawlessly. So I highly recommend having a sewing machine for stitching on scrapbooking projects. All right, I'm just finishing up stitching around the edge. And then once I've finished stitching, I trim off the excess thread and the cover of the mini album is ready to go. I love how Amber adds an eyelet to her mini albums through the spine. So I'm using a We Are Memory Keepers Big Bite, or you can use a crocodile, and I'm finding the center of the spine towards the top and then punching a hole with the Big Bite. Then you have to move that little dial up to the top to get the correct settings. I'm using one of the larger eyelets. I think it's 3/4 inch. No, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, it's one of the larger eyelets that We Are makes, and setting it with the crocodile. So that's really handy, and you can see a binder ring will go through it. This isn't the binder ring I end up using, but I just want to show that it fits through. Okay, so this is kind of the more complicated part, is creating the hidden paper hinge. I trimmed a piece of pattern paper to 4 1/8 by 3 7/8 inches. And this is the template that I'm going to use. You can find it available for download on my blog. I will leave a link to it here as well, so you can download this template. The large number at the top and the left are the size of the paper, and then the tiny numbers across the top, where all those black lines are the measurements from 0 to the right. So I start at 0 and then I score at 1/4 inch or 0.25 inches. The next line is at 1/2 inch or 0.5 inch, so on and so forth, all the way over to 3.875 inches. And then that last line is just the edge of the paper. So obviously you don't need to score that. The red lines are going to be the peaks of the accordion hinge, and the green lines are the spaces in between the hinges. The blue line on the left and the right side, those are going to be extra spaces on the left and right edge where you can add adhesive to help keep the hinge in place. So now I'll get back to the video so you can see exactly how I scored this paper. So I'm using this scoring board by Martha Stewart Crafts, and it is in increments of 1/8 inches. And so whether I'm scoring at 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch, that's what the template is for. And I'm creating 6 peaks with 6 valleys in between and the left and right edges. So it's quite fiddly, it's a little meticulous, a little detailed. You have to really press to get that score, but you don't want to press too hard or else it'll tear through the paper. So you might have to practice a few times. I know I sure did, in order to get this right. I've made all of the score lines according to this template. So everywhere there's a line is where I scored. Let me know if you have any questions about this and I will try and help. Once you have all of the lines scored, it's time to start folding things up. So I'm going to crease it back along all of the peak lines. So where there's a 1/4 inch on either side of the line, that's where you know is a peak. And then the lines that are thinner in between, those are the valleys or the gaps in between. And if you fold it hard enough along the peak edges, you won't need to fold or crease along those valley edges. So I folded those end edges up where that blue line is on the left and right side. I folded those up and now I am folding accordion style. So the gaps in between or those little valleys should just fold on their own if you creased and scored hard enough. So I'm just pinching it up into the accordion hinge. Great. That's the hardest part. Once you've got this part done, you should be golden. So it fits nicely in this 1.5 inch wide spine. But we're not done yet. We need to add adhesive. So if you folded it right, it should be perfectly flat on the back side. I'm using this 1 inch wide super sticky double-sided tape and I'm going to place it along the folded flat back side across the top and bottom first to hold everything in place and then making sure it fits. Trim off any excess adhesive that's hanging over the edges and then filling in the spots in between, so the entire backside is covered with this super strong double-sided sticky tape. So I'm just adding tape in this last section, peeling off that protective backing, and then I'm going to center it in the center of the spine piece. To make sure it stays in place really well, I'm going to use the scoring tool along those left and right flat edges and then rub it in between, so in those valleys, so it really gets stuck down onto the centerpiece. So you have 6 peaks, 6 hinges on which to add photos and papers, but I need more than 6. If I'm going to make a mini album, I want lots of pages. So I'm using a pair of fine-tipped scissors and I'm slicing right on through those peaks, those hinges, and that's going to leave me with 12 hinges. So now I have 12 hinges that I can add photos and papers and tags and lots of things. So I'm spreading them open so you can see all the individual hinges, and this is just a tricky way to add lots of hinges. I have printed photos to slightly smaller than 3 by 4, and when I trimmed them out, I left a white border so that they are exactly 3 by 4 inches. 12 photos back to back equals 6 photos total, and I'm just using double-sided adhesive to attach them back to back, and then I'm going to go ahead and add them into my album. To do this, I'm using a really thin, super sticky double-sided tape, and I want them to be in every other hinge. So here we go. I'm going to add it to the second hinge because I don't want a picture to be the first thing you see. I want it to have kind of an opening intro page with embellishments. And so on every other hinge, starting with the second hinge, adding double-sided tape to the back right edge, peeling off that protective layer, and then butting it right into that crease as far as I can and pressing that hinge into place over the adhesive. Doing that 6 times. So I should have 6 hinges left. So I'm going to make some pockets, because with pockets you can add more and more, and I'm always about the extra in mini albums. So again, I'm using my Truly Grateful collection with Pink Paislee, and I'm trimming lots of pattern papers to 3 by 4 inches. I think I trimmed all 24 pattern papers to 3 by 4 because I didn't know which ones I wanted to use. I don't have any paper repeats though, because there are enough papers and hinges and such to use a lot of different pattern papers. And to make the pockets, well, first I want to try and figure out which papers I want to use. I don't end up using the exact papers that I'm putting in place right now. Some of them are the same, but I did take a few extra minutes to pick and choose papers off camera. But I just want to show you the idea behind this, trying to pick papers that coordinated with the photos that are in between. So again, there should be a hinge in between each of the photos on which I'm going to add these pattern paper pockets. And I ended with a photo, so I'm not sure why I'm showing pattern papers right there. Anyway, to create the pockets, I stacked 2 pattern papers together, and I'm machine stitching with the same thread, the same running stitch that I did on the cover around the left, bottom, and right sides. And then for a little fun extra touch, I'm using a circle punch to create a notch across the top of all 6 pockets. So I have machine stitched to create the pockets and then notching them, just going halfway up this, I think it's a 1/2 inch circle punch to create that notch. They're not glued in yet. And then time to create tags. So I'm using this Avery tag as a template. It's a bit too tall, so I'm trimming off like a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4 inch of the tag and double checking to see if it fits inside the pocket, which it does. So I'm going to use it as a template to create 6 tags, 1 tag for each of the 6 pockets. Again, I am not repeating any of the pattern papers that I've used so far because I love using as many different pattern papers as possible, and using a hole punch to punch through the same spot through the tag to complete the tag shape. I'm using this hole reinforcer punch by We Are Memory Keepers to add that reinforce bit at the top. Again, it's a fun extra way to add more pattern papers. And then similar to the pockets and the machine stitching around the cover, I'm adding machine stitching around each tag. I just love this extra bit of texture and whimsy that it adds. And so I will do that same thing to all 6 tags. Now I'm going to add the pockets in place, and it's the same technique as adding the photos, where you place a little bit of thin, super sticky double-sided tape to the back right edge and then add it onto the hinge. So you should have 6 hinges. We've made 6 pockets, so I'm adding all 6 pockets to the album. Now, with the other album that I created, I actually embellished first before adding everything onto the hinges, which I think is a little bit easier because it's hard kind of to open up these spreads to embellish. So I would recommend embellishing first and then adhering the album together, but it still all worked out in the end. All right, everything is adhered in place. Gonna trim some of those thread ends, and now I'm going to tuck the tags into the pockets. 6 tags, 6 pockets, we are doing good. So once this step is complete, we're basically ready to embellish. The gist of the album is done. Now it's just time to add the fun stuff like stickers and die cuts and journaling spots and all kinds of different stickers, puffy stickers, epoxy stickers. So even flipping through it already, it's fun and you just want to keep going. So I will keep filming and show you exactly how I embellished this mini album. So every single thing you see is going to be from my Truly Grateful collection with Pink Paislee. It's fall themed, and we went to Serbia in October of 2016, so there were lots and lots of fall colors and changing leaves, so they go hand in hand. I am trimming a floral cardstock sticker in half, 2 different floral stickers, and I'm going to use half of each sticker to frame the top and bottom of this title. And once I had them in place, they seemed a little flat, so I decided to use these thick 3D foam squares to add dimension, and I love how this makes the flowers stand out. So just by adding some dimensional adhesive, you get lots of different depths to create shadows and lots of interest on your pages. And because there is that valley between each of the hinges, you have 1/8 of an inch to decorate on your pages. And with that 1.5 inch binding, that gives you lots of room. So you don't have to worry about making things too chunky. I mean, I guess there is a way to make it too chunky by adding lots of say, wooden buttons or pinwheels or other things that have lots of dimension to them, but I wasn't too worried about it in this case. So this album is all about layers. So you can see I'm just clustering some florals on the left side so that they're flush with the edge of that pattern paper that lines the album. And then on the right side, I'm going to add layers of die cuts and stickers and more, even wooden buttons. And I use lots of different adhesives when adding things in place for different reasons, using glue dots to add that intricate floral ampersand. For the wooden buttons, they do come with a thick 3D piece of foam on the back, and since the buttons are already thick as is, I always peel off that foam layer and then just use a glue dot to stick it in place. On this spread, I'm going to do more of the same, adding die cuts. This together was actually fussy cut from paper 1, and these tabs are from the journaling spots pack. There are 3 different tabs, and I always adhered them back to back, so I actually used 2 journaling spots to create the tabs, 2 packs of journaling spots to create the tabs. And just gonna keep going, keep embellishing. Sometimes I left things overhanging the border, but on this page you'll see I'm going to layer everything up, adhere it in place, and then use a pair of scissors to trim off the things overhanging on that right and bottom edge. So sometimes I leave things hanging off, sometimes I trim them. It's just kind of up in the air, not up in the air, but it's just kind of a spur of the moment decision whether I'm going to trim it off or leave it. So if it's too much overhang, I'll trim it off. If it's just a little bit, then it's not a big deal. All right, keep on going. So on this page, I'm just going to add a large sentiment to the center and then fold up the edges to create some interest. And then I'll do another clustering on this right edge and trim off the excess. So again, sometimes I use double-sided tape. So on this instance of these pumpkins, which are fussy cut again from paper 1, I used the double-sided tape. Sometimes I'll just use a roller adhesive, especially when you're sticking things on photos. I don't know why, but when you add any type of adhesive to a photo, it just stays. So it could be like the least sticky adhesive ever, but once it touches this photo, I don't know if it's the photo paper that I use, it just stays there forever. So if I'm sticking directly on a photo, I don't worry about the adhesive too much. But if it's going on to pattern paper, then I try to use a more permanent solution like a glue dot or a 3D sticker or super sticky double-sided tape. Now these tickets, it comes in 3. It's perforated 3 tickets together. So I tore them apart to create 3 individual tickets, folded them in half, and then trimmed off a little bit to create custom tags. And on every photo, I added a tab. Did I say tags or tab? Anyway, on every photo, I added a tab to help make turning the pages a little bit easier. And it also creates some fun things hanging over the edges. And I always add machine stitching to the tabs to create that whimsy and homespun look. I printed these photos at home. I often get asked what type of printer I use. I use a Canon Pro 100. I bought it from Amazon and I got it from the new and used section. So whoever bought the printer bought it or got it for some deal, and they took off the UPC, which made the value decrease a whole bunch. So win for them, win for me. I was able to get a brand new printer for, I think it was maybe $100 or so, but I love being able to print my photos at home. I can have them instantaneously, and the photo paper is also super important. I didn't really realize this until I upgraded and started using the more expensive photo paper. So quality does matter. I was using super cheap photo paper and the colors came out really dull and not nice, but then when I switched to Canon photo paper, the colors came out brilliantly. So when it comes to photo paper, you do get what you pay for, at least what I've noticed with this photo printer. And it's wide format, so you can print up to 13 inches wide. So I can print full 12 by 12 photos if I ever want to do that for layouts. A lot of the times I get my photos for mini albums printed at Costco, and I have a separate tutorial for that showing how I create mini collages. The last photo of this album, actually the second to last photo in this album, which I will get to eventually, right now I'm still embellishing away, is a collage of pictures because I always have more photos than I can typically include in an album, which is why I try and get creative, whether it's like a mini album inside of an album, an accordion fold, little cluster of pictures, or pictures inside tags that slip into pockets. I create interactive pages so that I can add more pictures. Anyway, sometimes I can't do all of that, so a little collage is a great way to go when I have a lot of pictures left over that I still really want to include. And I use Picasa to create those collages, and I printed these at home, but sometimes I'll just create 4x6 collages and have them printed at Costco. So I think this is the second day. So I did the first half of this album, the entire base in the first half one day, and then it turned into night. So it's winter time as I'm filming this, and the days are a lot shorter. So I try and film during the day, and I just want to say that, I mean, this album came together in 2 sittings. So they come together super quickly, especially if you don't trim or slice the peaks into 12 hinges. If you left just 6 hinges and kept this a 6-page album, I mean, it would come together like that. So if you're doing 6, comes together even quicker, but even with 12 hinges, this album came together in 2 sittings. By using just a single collection, or if you're using a single kit from a kit company, everything will coordinate and look great together. So you don't have to sit and think about what's going to coordinate with my photos, what's going to look good here. If you're using things that are meant to go together, and these photos particularly go well with Truly Grateful because it was fall and autumn, and all of these pretty flowers and leaves and autumn colors matched with Truly Grateful. So that just really helps make albums come together quickly. So again, this is one of those tickets that I trimmed in half and am adding to the edge to create a fun little page turner. The other album I created for my guest spot with Cocoa Vanilla Studio, the pages were from a single pattern paper with different 3x4 cards with all these sentiments on it, so it came together even quicker because I didn't have to embellish as much. But on these pages, I just tried to find sometimes a large sentiment to coordinate with the album, and otherwise, if not a large sentiment, I just layered die cuts and stickers together. Also, turn to the pattern paper pads to find things to fussy cut. That little cluster of flowers with the brown edge, it came from, actually that one came from a journaling spot, but within the 2x2 paper pads there are a lot of little sentiments, which I just used on that previous spread. The hello with the flowers above, which you could kind of see there for a second, is from the 2x2 paper pad. So with tinier mini albums, it's great to look through those tinier paper pads to find icons and sentiments and images to fussy cut out. We are almost done embellishing this mini album. It's been so fun to put together, and I've loved creating this tutorial so you can make one too. If you do make one, please tag me on Instagram at Paige Taylor Evans, or you can go on my Facebook group, which is called Paige Evans Happy Scrappy Place, and share all your pictures. Sometimes I used this heavy bookbinding weight to keep the pages open, especially as I'm filming through, to keep it flat so you can see. So I trimmed this gold grateful sticker in half so that it will fit on this back page. And then, like on the cover, I trimmed a flower sticker in half to edge along the top and bottom. For the journaling, you might have noticed that I didn't add any journaling within the album, but that's what the tags are for. So I copied and pasted our blog post recap from when we went to Serbia, pasted it into a new document, changed it to size 8 and my favorite font for mini albums, which is Remington Noiseless. And then I'm trimming it into strips, and then on the tags, trimming it into even smaller strips that will fit on the tag. And I use mono liquid adhesive to adhere the strips in place. I use pretty thick, smooth white cardstock to print my journaling on, and so it does take a minute or two for the strips to stay in place. So make sure you press them down for a good few seconds. I'm not exactly doing that right now in the tutorial, but I did off camera press them in place for a while to make sure that they are adhered permanently. And then once finished gluing the sentiments or the journaling in place, I went through my stash of Truly Grateful and found just a little something to add for a pop of interest and tuck it into the pocket. On the back of every tag, I added an epoxy sticker, which you will see when I do the flip through. For the final touch, I found this 1/2-inch copper binder ring and my stash of tassels and charms, sliding them onto the binder ring, and then it just clips through that eyelet that's on the binding. So this makes it fun and eclectic, adds character to the album, and that's it. So let's flip through the entire album and see what it looks like once completed. So there's the charms and the tassels, and you can see it's a chunky little thing, and that's just the way I like them. I left some of the threads long. If you don't like having threads long, you can easily trim them off. So here's the first tag with the journaling on the front and the epoxy stickers on the back. So there is a pull-out tag in every other section. You could even turn your photos into pockets by machine stitching around the edges, just like I did with the pattern papers, to add more tags, more fun, more whimsy, and more things into your album. There's always ways to get creative and add more pockets. So here's the journaling spaced between a butterfly, a puffy sticker, and then an epoxy sticker on the back. It's fun to look through all these albums and relive our memories from when we lived abroad. My husband did dental school through the army, and so we went to Germany for 4 years, and we traveled often. We went to 43 countries while we lived in Germany, and I'm slowly but surely making my way through documenting them all into mini albums. So we only spent a few hours in Serbia, maybe even just 2 hours, but it was another country that we hadn't been to, and I'm so glad that we went and have these photos to remember, even if it was a quick trip. And thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm here to help. Be sure to visit all the links below, and have a wonderful day.